over to you. I think Mark is supposed to make a wrap up. Am I correct?
Um,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
just
I'm
going
just
to
going to
start off
start.
our morning and then turn it over to Marty. Good morning, everybody. Welcome and glad to be back here with you all this morning to wrap up some of our learnings from yesterday. Next slide, please. I know we had spent quite a bit of time yesterday just going over the why and the what for networks. What's the rationale? What are the benefits? And looking specifically about how to get that implemented through your organizations. And that's what we're going to go deeper on today of the how. So the key thing we're going to focus on is a couple of exercises that you can participate in today, and we hope that will also be useful tools for you going forward in some of the meetings that you're running and leading, that you'll be able to use some of the exercises we use today to help build the trust and get the conversations going amongst your peers and stakeholders to help enable you to build the foundation of trust so that you can get the network built for your shared benefit. But to start off, I'd really like to just get a sense from you all what you have as far as lessons learned or takeaways or big ideas that came out of our session together yesterday. If we could just take a couple of minutes very briefly to hear back from you all. What did you learn about networks? What did you find most interesting? What's an ongoing challenge? Just in a word or a sentence of how you're feeling today.
Maybe we can start with Liberia.
You want to go?
Okay, thank you very much. We do appreciate your presentation, and for us, our attention was totally drawn to the 4 principles. That is mission, not organization, trust, not control, humility, not brand, build constellations and not stars. We are strongly convinced that these 4 principles project the essence of the whole network leadership. And it is something that all of the other presentations centers around. So we say thank you, and this is what was greatly learned from Liberia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any
Any
other
other thoughts
from
from other
individuals?
individuals? If you want to report
Another
another
tool
tool to you,
that would be
that would be
great.
great for that.
Maybe Burkina Faso has to say some. Oh, yes, this is Guinea. Guinea, yes. Go ahead now.
Voilà, hier,
Yesterday, I personally appreciated very much your introduction and the fact that trainers told us that we should focus on the network. And I saw within the examples of South Africa and the guides, they had an institution there, but despite the bottlenecks on the field, they were focused on their objectives. And they also specified that we needed a lot of humility because that would allow for more awareness by the team of what is at stake. And on the network, they talked about collaboration, saying that you should focus your individual status and focus more on the collective. They also said that we should keep in mind the mission. They talked about the 4 principles, but put a stress on the mission. It's very easy to abandon something that you don't have control over. So these were the highlights of yesterday's sessions. You need humility, you need collaboration, you need to focus on the network, so the collective and the objectives. Thank you very much also for the material provided.
Thank you so much for that very good wrap up of what we covered. Any other last comments before we get
We get
started?
started
Yes, Burkina
morning.
Faso has something to say.
Very good. D'accord, oui, merci.
Thank you. Yesterday, what we took away from the session is the synergy between actors, the trust that should be built amongst actors, and also be more collective oriented, meaning that you are more focused on the group rather than the individual. I also very much appreciated the four principles, and more specifically the mission. We should focus on the mission, and there needs to be a minimum of trust, because in order to work together we need to trust each other. So trust is pivotal. Humility is very important, of course. Let's not forget the egocentric aspect. Need to put the group forth. So again, work on what unites us rather than what divides us.
Thank you so much for that very
Very
insightful
insightful
summary.
summary.
Great to hear that you're taking away these lessons. I really appreciate your feedback, and clearly you learned a lot, and probably many of you already know this and have experienced it and led this way. So I just want to, next slide, please. Just share kind of that larger purpose of the network. Again, you'll get into the nuts and bolts of who exactly does what and who's going to contribute what over time. But I think that big picture that you all very wisely pointed out, as you have to balance the individual and collective interests and be humble and build trust. And that is what you do in order to help engage others in the network. And I often say that the network should help make your work easier. If not, then there's something wrong, and it should make the network members, all of the network members, work easier. And you're seeking to get leverage on your shared resources to get to that greater impact that you're seeking. So I think this quote is a really good way to capture that ethos. And next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Marty now to say a bit about the importance of trust and then how you go about building that, because that's one of the most critical pieces of network building. Marty, over to you.
Thank you, Jane, and good day to all of you. And thank you for your comments this morning. It really helps us make sure that we are supporting you in the best way possible. As Jane said, we want to talk about the 5 C's again that we shared yesterday. Just a couple of them we're going to dive deeper into. And the first one will be this whole idea of cultivating trust for accomplishment. So as you all stated this morning, if we have our mission in front of us, and that is what we want to accomplish, then how do we build the trust within our network in order to succeed in accomplishing that? And really what's so important is to keep that shared purpose that you all discussed yesterday as the focus of how everyone in the network enters the space and provides their contributions, as well as shares their concerns about how the network is doing, how healthy is it, and so on. But what we've tended to find, as Jane shared with you, even in the case studies yesterday, is that some of the hardest work that we have to do relates specifically to the relationships that we have with one another. And so this morning we're going to do some exercises, and we will talk more about them in the next minute or two. If we could advance to the next slide, please. So this is a quote by Jane herself that I often use. Strategy and structure matter, but the single most important factor in all collaborations that succeed is these trust-based relationships amongst the partnerships. That is the glue that holds the network together. And when we see failure and struggles and challenges in networks, there are many barriers. You have already stated some of them. You know what these barriers are. But when trust breaks down, that becomes the most compelling thing that is eroding the ability of the network to move forward. Next slide, please. So this morning or today, what we're going to do is have each of you at your tables with your peers share your true stories. We're going to be sharing our personal journeys. We're going to be talking about how our journey evolved from an internal sense, not just all the things on the external. What we all know in building relationships is that we can approach one another and keep up sort of a facade or a wall or a barrier in our relationships by only focusing on the external. So what we want to do today is ask you to share your true story about your internal self. And we will give you some directions on the next slide about how to do this. So at each of your groups, your table groups, we'll ask you to pick a timekeeper. We will probably also have Jonas remind people when the 5 minutes are up. But how this is going to work, and I will try my best to make this as clear as possible, is that one person starts by taking 5 minutes to share their personal story. While that person is sharing their story, no one else speaks. No one interrupts. No one asks questions. The person is allowed to just take the 5 minutes and walk through how it is that they came to do what they do. And more importantly than what they do, why do they do it? Get into trying to better understand each other from the perspective of what it is that you actually can bring to the table and why you are at the table. How did you get there? What is it that inspires you? What are the things that really make up your internal self? This can be a challenge for many of us because it's not easy to share that kind of a story. But after the person speaks and does their 5 minutes, then the other people go around the table and provide feedback. And the feedback should be in the form of 1 or 2 sentences, not a lot of feedback, but just share something about the story that you heard that struck you, that impacted you, or that you really were interested in hearing about. And so when all the feedback has been given in about a 2-minute period, then the next person starts and does their 5-minute presentation about their personal story. So roughly 7 minutes of time will elapse for each person, and we'll go around the table until everyone has had a chance. Some of you may have tables that have more people than others. So for those of you who get done sooner, you can discuss some of the things that we went over yesterday or what else you are concerned about in building networks. So Jonas, can we get a sense? Is everybody understanding the instructions?
Yes, I think so. We'll select a speaker and a timekeeper, and then one person will produce the feedback after the 5 minutes.
Yes.
Very good.
And everybody talk to me. So everybody in the group
when the
The
exercise is
exercises,
Okay.
and
and maybe we can just add,
the personal stories is beyond your work, your day-to-day work and your job and your role. And the whole purpose of this is to get past our formal titles and our status and the role that we do professionally and go back to what inspired you, what were challenges, what were turning points in your life, and go back all the way to there might be events in your childhood or in your early adulthood that truly affected the course of your life to bring you to the work that you do today. So we're really trying to peel back the layers and get into the personal. So we're not seeking to talk about who's doing what in the network yet. It's just focused on what's your background and why do you take the time and energy to do the work that you do every day, but how you got there.